How are you doing today? We are in chapter 5 of volume 3. We're talking about the manager's function. As an operator, eventually, hopefully, some of you guys will become managers. And really, they're no different than a CEO. When you're a manager of a water facility or a wastewater facility, you are more into the business side. I mean, you're still kind of, you got to keep your hands and eyes on the day-to-day operations. But some of the bigger municipalities, you know, you basically have people that do that. Maybe you're work at a small village and you're the only operator. Well, you are the business manager. You are the chief there, even if you're only one. And so when we talk about manager functions, we're talking about planning. The book says planning consists of determining the goals and policies and procedures to achieve the agency's objectives. We want to have a mission statement. We want to have a plan for the next year. We want to have a plan for our organization, whether that be county or city. We want to organize. Organize means that the manager defines the function of the work that needs to be accomplished and then decides how to allocate responsibility and the authority for management and the consequences line positions. When we uh, at your facility, you probably have a hierarchy of who's in charge. Incident command. If you've taken any incident command structure, you have how many people report to that manager and who that manager reports to. And so knowing who's in leadership and respecting that chain of command is important for water and wastewater utilities. Directing on page 4 or 5 involves guiding, teaching, motivating, and supervising operators and utility staff members. We can talk about management functions all you want, but unless you're out there and you have a heart for people and you're going to guide them, you're going to teach them, you're going to give them the correct resources, all the management principles and classes you can take are not going to matter. You need to be a manager that um, gets down, helps people, understands what they are, be firm and fair. And so that's kind of one couple things we're talking about. Uh, um, our tax base is our customers, and we need to make sure that we are providing a good service to our customers. As people, if you work for the government, a lot of times we've lost our jobs to contractors because we were not providing a good service. And so if you do work for a government organization or any organization, making sure that your product and who you are as a person is not getting outsourced is imperative of what we do. In the planning process, on page 4 or 7, we have goal settings, we have the objectives, the strategies, the alternative analysis, and the financial strategy. We can set all the goals we want, but if we don't have the finances to implement any of those goals, that it's basically goals on a paper. So we need on 409, organizing. A utility should have a written organizational plan with written policies. If you don't know, ask your human resource. They probably have that. Job descriptions should be um, reviewed annually and updated. Um, and on table 5.3 are your typical job duties. So you have your superintendent, who is responsible for the entire facilities administration. Then you have your electrician 2, your electrician 1, laboratory technician, maintenance foreman, and you might say, I'm all those. Well, yeah, you are all those, but make sure that your job description says that or other duties is required. You know, Responsibility means answering to those who are in the chain of command and to explain how and why you have used your authority. So we're all responsible to someone above us. And, Delegation is the act of giving power to another person and organization to accomplish a specific job. We want to delegate work. If you're a person that micromanages and does all the work and never teaches someone or delegate them or give them the power to complete the work, then you're always going to be the one doing the work, and you're not providing um, you know, pathways for other operators um, to flourish. We talk about decision making processes on 415. We need to identify this decision. We need to collect the data. We need to develop alternatives. We need to analyze those alternatives, select it, and then implement it, and then monitor and evaluate the decision. So, those 7 steps, are crucial. So let's say, um, we have a water tank that needs repaired, and that needs to go through all 7 stages of um, of decision making. Are we going to replace it or are we going to repair it? What's the different benefits? And then we need to um, come to an answer, and then obviously monitor and evaluate that decision, whether that was a good decision or bad, or how did that affect us, and then make changes um, over time. Organization and culture. Every organization has a culture. Culture is a set of assumptions and beliefs and values within an organization. Um, you can develop your own culture just by who you are as a person. You are the change that the culture needs. And so, as water operators and wastewater operators, we want the culture to be we fix our stuff, we do it right, and the community's protection is our utmost for formal goal. That's what we want. We want a continual improvement culture. We want positive culture. If you're going to work every day very negative, that's going to affect your coworkers um, and and you as a person. So when we talk about workforce development, staffing, we need to staff our water and wastewater plants. We need to pick people from diverse backgrounds. We need to hire, um, off of the knowledge, skills, and abilities and that a person has and brings. And sometimes you hire someone for because of past things on their resume. When we look about, we need a staffing plan. We need to see how many people we need. Are we going to work, um, you know, 24/7? So do we need an operator there 24/7? Can we have an operator assistant there? Getting a staffing plan, getting a qualifications profile, you screen and evaluate candidates, trying to pick that best candidate, and not just on paper, but that best candidate personality plus their qualifications is really what we're looking for. Because once you hire someone, that culture can be negatively affected by that person. Maybe you have a human resource department, but once again, we'll highlight this on 428. It is illegal to discriminate and disqualify applicants based on race, sex, age, gender, identity, religion, or disability. So when you're questioning someone, you might not think the questions you're asking are discriminatory, but just knowing what you ask and making sure that they're not. We want to use the ouch principle. It must be objective, uniform in your treatment of applicants, employees, consistent with the utilities policy, and have job relatedness. When we talk about job relatedness, you must base hiring decisions on the applicant's qualifications to meet that specific job requirement. They may be a doctor, but if they don't know how to work on a pump, it's kind of talking about corn and rice, two different things. And so, we want to use that ouch principle when we're hiring people. training and certification. It should be that as you progress through certification, that you receive more money, at least to the level of your plant. What level of certification is your plant? Do you need a secondary operator record, meaning that, according to the EPA, in some states, you have to have someone with a license there so many hours out of the day. Um, so getting certified operators and always having a program of certifying people coming up behind you. People retire, people get sick, people move. And so always having a backup plan is critical in the utility sector. We want leadership to develop. You should have a performance appraisal. You should um, have a job review, maybe at 6 months after an employee's hired, and then every year following that, just so they know. It's not a time to rip them down, tear them up, but it's a time where you review how they're doing, how they can improve, and how they improved over the last job evaluation. Dealing with disciplinary problems, uh, people are messy, and so you're going to have discipline problems, and you need to stay focused on the important things. The problem at hand, how to deal with them, keeping your voice down, documenting everything. Now that we're in such a highly uh, litigious society, documenting everything, making sure that you have your ducks in order, and trying to encourage them. But sometimes you do have to hand out discipline, and you need to make sure that when you hand that out, that is according to the handbook, and that you obviously have talked that through um, with your supervisors above you. Workplace violence, it does happen. You need to monitor that. Obviously, in this society now, we have bullying. When I was getting up, that was just kind of the way it was. When you first got hired, everybody bullied the new person. But, times have changed and we need to develop as a culture. So we need to not, um, you know, be more cognizant of bullying. Contracting for work, as wages get up, sometimes it is more beneficial, a bit more beneficial to um, just contract it out. There's some advantages to that and some limitations to that. Um, some of the advantages is how much it's going to cost. Some of the disadvantages is with contracting, you don't always know the quality and maybe depending on who you hire, the level of integrity and just level of, I guess, zeal they have for completing the contract. I take a lot of pride in my job, and there are contractors that do too. It's just finding the right contracting uh, company to do that. Talk about expenses. So we have revenues, expenses, just like your home company. Um, they're usually categorized as operating expenses or capital expenses. Debt service, the amount of money required annually to pay the interest on outstanding debts or funds due to a maturing bond debt or redemption of bonds. Utilities, they do go into debt. They do bonds for maybe a new wastewater tank or a new water tower, and knowing that debt service that your utility has. Depreciation, when we talk about capital operating expenses, let me back up. Operating expenses are the cost of running the utility day in and day out, and employee expenses are the most common and largest part with insurance of operating expenses. And then we have capital expenses. So that's operating. Now we have capital. Capital expenses are the cost of rehabilitating and replacing existing infrastructure, installing new infrastructure, including, and it gives all those storage tanks, pumps. You know, um, Capital expenses are treated differently than utility operating expenses. But having your capital assets and doing a depreciation, knowing that your assets. So if you have a tank, you know when you build it in 2025, you know in 2024 is one less year that tank is going to be in service, and then 2026 another year, and so depreciating that asset so that you have money to replace that, and having putting that into the capital improvement plan, going through and saying, okay, what do we need to put in an improvement plan for the next 5 to 10 years that needs replaced or fixed, so that when we get to that, we're not uh, having to honestly look like we're incompetent to city managers, that we didn't have a plan in place for infrastructure needs. Rate settings, most of that's going to probably not be done by you, but if you're in management, you need to set your rate, and there are government agencies that oversee that. You need to set your rate so that you can cover your expenses and future expenses. Um, if you set your rate so low that you're not covering it, obviously you're making the citizens happy for the short term, but you're putting the burden on the citizens that come after them. And so, setting the right um, rate is imperative. We talk about financial indicators, just like financial indicators with your home business. It's important. So we'll talk about a few. So operating ratio is a measure of the total revenues divided by the total operating expenses. And so, you kind of see if you're in the black or the red that year. Coverage ratio is the measure of the ability of the utility to pay the principal and interest on the loans and bonds, in addition to any unexpected expenses. So knowing your financial indicators are important. Budgeting, as you go through the year, you need to budget your funds. We talk about purchase orders. So when something breaks, I fill out a purchase order for a blower for one of the wastewater plants. That has to get approved. That gets out of a fund that was budgeted the previous year. They attach that number, let's say 9052. They attach that number to that fund. They give a purchase order to me, where then I can give that to a vendor to purchase that product. So it's a little bit different. We use a lot of purchase orders in the uh, water and wastewater industry. Is a little different than your home. Home, we use a credit card. We just call up and pay for it. A lot of times we use the purchase order system, and that's in your budgeting. Maybe hopefully you have a budgeting finance department in your utility. Inflation every year, inflation is going to happen right now. We're seeing sky high inflation, but you need to know that, next year, what is it going to cost me to retain these employees? What is it going to cost me to buy a new pickup truck for the distribution or collection department? Knowing what inflation is, knowing what your interest rate is and your bond record keeping. We need to, as managers, we need to record in everything. If you have a good computer system, not only recording our preventative maintenance, but also just any type of maps, design maps that from as builds to design of the plant, keeping all that personnel records, everything that you can think of needs to be recorded, and then know how long you need to keep it. Obviously, if you're keeping it for 50 years, there may not be any use to that. But they have what they call sunset or sunshine laws, where at least a lot of the records you need to keep for at least 7 years. And so, we want to make sure that we're at least keeping it up to um, what what is required by law. Asset management, we talk about, they have asset management tools that you can use, and just knowing and tracking your assets. Um, is great. Having an inventory system, is it lost? Do we have it? I know for me, just keeping track of inventory every year, it just reminds me, oh yeah, we do have um, a pump for the Clarifier 4 or whatever the product may be, having a record of that. And then also, that goes into a document that the finance needs that then reports that to the state. So having accurate asset inventory is also important in the in our system. When we talk too, we need to talk about our communication system. You know, um, what happens if we have a lift station that overflows? How are we going to contact them? What if our water tower fails? How are we going to communicate? What means are we going to do? We have a form already printed off, so we're not at the last moment. We need to talk to our employees about how we're going to communicate, how we're going to communicate with each other, whether that be a daily log or a computer system, or we don't want to keep it on text, phone, how we don't keep a recorded log, and then how we don't communicate with our stakeholders, how we don't communicate with our supervisors, and then also with the citizens. I was just out this week tagging houses for manhole repair, and really the I was using a generic tag, and a lot of people were confused when they called in, and really I need to update that um, uh, tag. When we talk about we need to define your target audience, we need to identify key employees that are responsible for the communication. Obviously, if a person's not comfortable with talking in front of people, we don't want them talking, or maybe they talk too much. But we need to follow a specific timeline for each message too. On page 483, there's crisis communication and plan. You can see a drinking water warning notice, maybe an overflow notice that you would have. Um, so, having good oral and written communication is great. Having a hazardous communication standard, every water and wastewater plant typically will have some sort of chemical. How are we storing those? How are we labeling those? How are we communicating to employees and first responders what is there? Um, and having those inventory materials listed and organized in some sort of SDS um, a folder that can be reviewed by everybody and everybody has access. On 495, you can kind of see the hazard communication standards for, health hazard, flame, corrosion, exploding bomb, environmental, acute toxicity, oxidizers. So just as an operator, be familiar with some of those communication standards. 497, you kind of see the National Fire Protection Association hazard rating. Obviously flammable is red, blue is health, yellow is instability. Um, and then, knowing that, and especially for your test, you might have a test question on that on one of your operator certifications. But, you know, knowing how to know the degree of the chemical that you're using is awesome to know. Um, when we talk about physical security, as administrator, we need to make sure that our facility is protected for the public. We don't want any terrorist threats, but we also don't want any kids breaking in. They can do a lot of damage, especially even on wastewater. A lot of the times we think about water infrastructure, but if someone hacks into our wastewater system and shuts off the pumps, millions of dollars could be damaged to people's basements with some flips of switches and some disconnecting of some call outs. So we really want to make sure that our computers are physically safe, our SCADA network is physically safe, and then also our plants are physically safe. So a lot of those will be surrounded by barbed wire. Um, And we talk about cybersecurity. I've had ransomware come on to our SCADA system before and had to shut it down. We had to get a new one. Um, Having a plan for risk and resilience. What happens if a tornado comes through? What are we going to do? Who are we going to contact, and how are we going to bounce back from that? And do we have the assets to do that? Are we training people to do that? um, and knowing the incident command structure, knowing all those going into uh, a hazardous or traumatic event that happens at your water wastewater plant. Having a plan so that you can, you may know what to do, but having a written plan so if you're on vacation and your operators are there, they can follow that written rule. Hope this was informative, and I will see you later. Thank you.